Now, on Race to Save the Planet, stories of people all over the world taking action to save their environment.
People don't feel like, well, the problem is enormous, but I can do nothing. This is something that everybody can do.
From Kenya's farmers fighting deforestation, Russian citizens fighting air pollution, to heads of state and even film stars, people are doing something in the race to save the planet. They've understood that it's now or never.
Major funding for Race to Save the Planet is provided by the Annenberg CPB Project and public television viewers. Corporate funding is provided by Ocean Spray. Our continuing aim is to preserve and protect what we cannot create. Additional funding is provided by Jesse Smith Noyes Foundation, Corporation for Public Broadcasting, the John D. and Catherine T. MacArthur Foundation, and Carnegie Corporation of New York, and by the following.
We've come to the last episode in our series, Race to Save the Planet. We've been all over the world, and we've seen an enormous variety of environmental problems. Destruction of the tropical forests, disappearing wildlife, polluted air in our cities, contamination of rivers and oceans, and threats to the global climate. It seems everywhere you look, the environment's under stress. And it really is a race to save whole sections of this planet. Those tropical forests are disappearing at the rate of an acre a second, and the rate is speeding up. They'll be gone in 30 or 40 years, taking with them about a third of the world's plants and animals. That's within our lifetime. By the year 2000, that's less than 10 years away, the Earth's climate will be warmer than it's been in over 100,000 years. If we don't do something, there'll be enormous calamities within a very short time. Now, it's very easy to feel helpless in the face of such overwhelming problems, but in this series, we've shown that there are ways we can do things differently. We can live on the planet without destroying it. Of course, most of us hate to change the way we do things, but in this final program, we explore how change can come about. There are people all over the world who've decided they're going to step in and shake things up, whether it's international leaders negotiating global agreements, or ordinary people doing extraordinary things in their local communities. It does come down to each and every one of us.
Come to the meeting tomorrow night at 6:30.
Changing the world. We'll tell the story of Lou Dunn, an ex-Marine working to close a toxic waste dump in California. And of Larissa Yurtova, who has organized her Moscow neighbors to fight air pollution. We'll meet Wangari Maathai, a dynamic professor who started a nationwide movement to restore Kenya's devastated forests.
Quite a high price, I think.
This Greek businessman devised a way to prevent oil pollution at sea. And because of this diplomat's vision, there's now a treaty protecting the Mediterranean. The environment is on the agenda of prime ministers. And it's on the minds of film stars. They've all been struck by the urgent need to save the planet. Now or never. This is Casmalia, California. The scarcely 200 people who live in this town have the usual things on their minds, like jobs and kids. But in Casmalia, one concern overshadows them all: the toxic dump next door. It's one of only 2 facilities in California which accept the state's most toxic industrial waste. Chemicals like benzene, phenol, and cyanide. The dump is located up in the hills about a mile out of town. The state claims that it's not a threat to public health, but residents here are unconvinced. Abe Jackson.
My wife has cancer. She's in bed right now, dying with cancer. I've lost a brother, sister-in-law, uncle, and aunt, and a buku of friends.
2 years ago, the State Department of Health Services told us that we were just full of toxic superstition. When people have been seeing their friends and their neighbors dying, I see my kid, my youngest, my little girl, have a 1.5-inch diameter cyst pulled out of her neck. I'm supposed to believe it's just superstition. That doesn't cut it, but I'm damn angry that my State Department of Health Services that's supposed to protect me and my family and my neighbors is not doing it. Not doing it in the least.
In the early 1980s, the owners of the dump used to spray treated cyanide waste into the air to enhance evaporation. On days when the wind was blowing from the dump, the Casmelia school had to be closed repeatedly when children became ill from the fumes. The spraying has since stopped, but townspeople still worry about contaminated dust and groundwater. Although it's very difficult to prove that specific illnesses were caused by exposure to toxic waste, 67 local physicians signed their names to this ad in the newspaper. For 7 years, area residents have tried to persuade government officials to close the dump down. A leader in the fight has been ex-Marine Lou Dunn. A non-smoker, he has developed emphysema, and his wife has cancer.
It's like going into battle, I guess, in defending your home and your life and your way of life. Do you let people come into your home, beat up your children, murder your family, and not say anything, and let them get? I can't do that.
And then we're going to get up, and we're going to throw the government out of bed with the polluters.
After years of failing to get any action the conventional way, through their county or state governments, the people of Casmelia turned to the unconventional, the environmental group Greenpeace. Campaigner Bradley Angel.
It's a long fight. It's a difficult fight. There's many obstacles. But the fact is that throughout the country, toxic waste dumps have been closed. Proposed dumps and incinerators have been defeated. And it has not been because the government has ruled in our favor. That's happened in very few circumstances. It's happened, again, where people have educated themselves, organized their friends and neighbors and their community, and got out and raised hell.
Come to the meeting tomorrow night at 6:30.
Going public and raising hell is exactly what Casmelia residents have learned they must do.
Hey, Tony!
It would be hard to find a more unlikely radical, but even Lou Dunn has joined Greenpeace as a volunteer.
When we cried out for help in the 80s and nobody would listen, Greenpeace came, they helped us. And prior to that, I thought anybody told me that I'd have 22 Greenpeace kids sleeping in my house with long hair and purple hair and crazy clothes on. I told them they're nuts. Greenpeace came and they listened and they said, we want you to learn how to do this, to stand up and don't be intimidated. You don't have to be intimidated by elected officials.
Casmelia is no longer intimidated. It was the townspeople who uncovered the fact that the dump was over capacity and informed the Federal Environmental Protection Agency. Although a closure order was issued, pending appeal, the dump was allowed to remain in operation.
When they come, they're sure as heck not coming in.
So today, Nick Ermiter and other Casmelia residents are taking matters into their own hands by blockading the dump entrance.
There we go. People of Casmelia are shutting down this dump. We've got another person diagnosed with cancer in our town, and we aren't allowing them to come in and kill any more of us. The government won't, the people will.
Close the toxic dump. The government won't, the people will.
The day's first consignment of waste rolls up to the protesters. Not far behind, the county sheriffs. Their job is to get the growing line of trucks into the dump.
Everybody's got their choice made. You know, you have to do what's right, but you want to know the reason we're doing this is for the town. We're doing it for the people that died that we don't want forgotten, and our kids, You look at all our kids here, and we can't let it happen anymore. It's time to say enough is enough. So I just want you to know that there's some of us that are willing to take that step over the line.
I command you in the name of the people of the state of California to disperse.
We are the people.
We are the people.
If you do not, you shall be arrested for violation of 407, 408, and Penal Code Section 409, failure to disperse.
Yes, sir.
Okay, I have to advise you're under arrest.
11 people chose arrest, an act of civil disobedience when they felt legal remedies had been exhausted. For the people of Casmelia, environmental rights and the rights of citizenship cannot be separated.
We tend to forget that this is our country, we the people. And that's what our Constitution and our Bill of Rights say. We the people. We have to take it back and be responsible for what happens.
In Washington, Lester Brown of the World Watch Institute sees such citizen involvement as essential in this critical time.
Given the scale, the problems that we face, it's easy to be discouraged. The encouraging thing is that we know the kinds of things that need to be done, and we know that as individuals, we can all begin to work on them. No one of us is going to save the world, alone, nor is any country going to save the world alone now. We have to begin working together. It's going to take each of us, and it's going to take all of us.
In the Soviet Union, as well as in America, the environment has become the concern of ordinary people. From Moscow to Siberia, Soviet citizens are awakening to environmental problems that have long been ignored. There are official limits on air pollution, for example, but 100 cities exceed them by 10 times. Few vehicles or factories have any emission controls whatsoever. Outside Moscow stands the Bratieva housing project. It was built 5 years ago next to a vast industrial complex, although factories and residential areas are officially supposed to be separated by buffer zones. Bratieva's convenient location and brand new modern apartments made it a highly desirable place to live. But the 60,000 people who flocked here were in for a nasty surprise. Bratieva's residents discovered that something most people take for granted is missing. Roughly half the time here, factory emissions make it impossible to draw a breath of fresh air. In these new times of activism, people like Larissa Yurtova refuse to put up with it.
Эти вот вредные выбросы со всех наших предприятий, нефтеперерабатывающие, коксогазовые, ТЭЦ, станция аэрации, все это к нам сюда вот летит, и вот здесь вот крутится, и годами это все накапливается. И вот этот вот страшный воздух, как только ветер вот с той стороны, с этих предприятий, мы это ощущаем на себе сразу. Можно даже закрыть нос и добежать до своего подъезда, закрыть все двери и окна и сидеть и никуда не высовываться. Вот так мы ощущаем это все.
Local physicians like Valeria Stratov have been investigating the health of Bratieva's residents. This 5-year-old girl suffers from chronic asthma, made worse by the bad air here. Today, Larissa and the doctor are gathering evidence of health problems to present to the Moscow City Council.
Бабуля, скажите, а как ваши внуки переносят вот здесь наш воздух? Как они себя чувствуют?
Наши внуки, вся братья, только многодетные одни, и все мучаются, во всех, у кого не дед, мой ребенок рвет, у моего ребенка кровь, а в садах то же самое, сады, садов.
Residents have repeatedly asked authorities to monitor air quality and investigate health problems here, but so far officials have not responded.
Я его сейчас видела, я просто вот у меня палка в руках, я, наверное, ему, пусть это мне, может быть, я буду не права, но я ему просто могла бы с палкой вот этой по голове огреть, вот этой вот палкой.
Для чего его выбирали?
Потому что для чего? Мы надеялись.
It's not hard to tell which factory is polluting because each has its own signature smell. Because she's trained as a chemist, Larissa can identify phenol, benzene, and several other airborne emissions. So she knows precisely which plant manager she should call.
Алло? Алло, это нефтеперерабатывающий завод? Здравствуйте, скажите, пожалуйста, звоню вам уже какой раз, никак не могу дозвониться. Что у вас сегодня опять происходит? Такие жуткие выбросы, в такую жару, и совершенно нельзя даже окно открыть.
8-year-old Maxime often gets headaches and must stay indoors with the windows shut.
Сегодня как себя чувствуешь?
The Soviet housing system makes it hard for Larissa or her neighbors to move, so they're determined to get things changed.
Гулять сегодня не пойдешь?
Bratyeva's Ecological Committee meets every Tuesday night. It was Larissa who got it organized to plant trees, clean up trash, and protest the air pollution. After scores of demonstrations, the committee has succeeded in blocking more industrial expansion. Plans for 30 new factories have been shelved. But as yet, there's been no progress on cleaning up or closing down any existing plants. And so Bratyeva's struggle for clean air continues.
Этот факел для жителей Братеева означает символ медленной смерти. Мы, вставая утром, идя на работу, видим перед собой этот факел и вновь ощущаем потребность бороться за нашу экологическую ситуацию в Братеево. В общем-то, это у нас единственный выход – это бороться за свою жизнь и за жизнь окружающих людей. Потому что все, в принципе, в наших руках.
Irkutsk, Siberia. This demonstration took place before the days of Glasnost, when public protest took great courage. It's little known around the world, but the Soviet environmental movement began 30 years ago. It was inspired by one great symbol, Lake Baikal in Siberia. The world's largest body of fresh water, Baikal is home to 2,000 unique plant and animal species. It is revered by the Russian people as a natural treasure. In the late 1950s, it was revealed that waste from 2 paper mills was seriously polluting the lake. So journalists and scientists started a popular protest movement, the first in the Soviet Union. Today, Baikal remains the touchstone for Soviet environmentalists. Scientist Gennady Konstantinov.
Байкал, да, несет некий нравственный аспект для народа, и его недаром называют священным озером. Байкал сейчас учит другому, учит тому, что мы должны понять то место в природе, которое отведено человечеству, и относиться соответственно к природе как ее часть.
Although the public pressure forced pollution controls on the paper mills, Baikal is still threatened by development all around. Continuing debate over this great symbol paved the way for glasnost, or freedom of expression. Now that glasnost is well established, environmentalism is spreading like wildfire around the country. Writer Gleb Gorishin of Leningrad.
Не будь гласности, конечно, не могла бы быть это экологическое движение. Я прекрасно помню те времена, когда на эти темы запрещалось нам писать, когда все вопросы о загрязнении Ладожского озера, о состоянии воды, экологии и так далее снимались, вычеркивались и так далее. Сейчас мы этим занимаемся. Это наш хлеб насущный, это облегчение для нас.
Here in Leningrad, journalists and scientists writing about water pollution have made their city the capital of the new environmental movement. Routine dumping of sewage and industrial waste has rendered the city's waters among the dirtiest in the world. A strong citizens' campaign to stop pollution has been spearheaded by journalist Sergei Svetkov and scientists Vladimir Bressler and Alla Marshenko, who started independent studies of water problems here.
Первое и самое страшное содержание определяется любым ленинградцам и любым жителям. Вы поднюхаете воду, и она пахнет, имеет аптечный запах. То есть в ней присутствует фенол. Фенол – это яд, который не выводится организмом, а накапливается по мере употребления этой воды.
200 industrial plants discharge phenol and heavy metals like mercury and lead directly into the river which flows through the city. Leningrad is built on the Neva Bay, which directly receives untreated sewage. Intestinal diseases in the city are epidemic. Environmentalists claim that construction of this huge dam is turning the bay into a stagnant swamp, stinking from trapped sewage and toxic chemicals. Once complete, the dam will be 17 miles long. It is designed to seal off the bay during major storms and so protect the city from floods. Its designers claim that these floodgates, covering a tenth of the dam's length, allow sufficient drainage out to sea. Supervisor Alexander Portnov.
В конце концов, мы уверены, безусловно, что сооружение этого комплекса позволит выполнить свои задачи и не будет решающим образом влиять на экологическую обстановку в Невской губе.
Но не надо быть специалистом, не надо быть ученым для того, чтобы понять, что вот это остановленное движение воды, которая была остановлена этой дамбой, не может не сказаться на состоянии Невской губы. Это стала стоячая вода, первейшей проблемой для каждого ленинградца.
As a result of the public outcry, the city has halted construction while an independent commission considers changing the dam's design. To environmentalists, the dam not only aggravates the city's pollution problems, it is a monument to the Stalinist view that man should conquer nature, an idea perhaps best forgotten. Vladimir Bressler.
Нас воспитывали, что человек – это царь природы. Но человек не царь природы. Человек – только маленькая часть природы. И если мы будем продолжать нарушать равновесие, то естественный конец – это не гибель природы, как говорят, это гибель человека. Природа останется. Она просто смахнет с земли человека и дальше будет развиваться сама без него.
Soviet citizens are making it clear to their government that a top priority must be a safe environment for their children. Restoring environmental as well as economic health will be a critical test for President Gorbachev's reforms. So far, a new environmental ministry has been set up, and new laws are being written. Pressure from ordinary people here can bring about change, just as in Casmelia, California. And these common concerns present a profound opportunity.
Но я считаю, что экология и экологические проблемы – это та нравственная основа, на которой, в общем-то, возможно, так сказать, объединение всех людей, потому что экологические проблемы не имеют государственных границ. И если мы сейчас не сумеем объединить наши усилия, то мы просто потеряем нашу планету.
Environmental issues are also vitally important to the future of these Kenyan children. Here, already fragile soils must grow even more food to feed the fastest growing population in the world. All over the country, trees are being cut to meet the rising need for firewood and to clear the land for agriculture. 10 trees are cut for every one planted. After the trees are gone, there's nothing left to anchor the precious topsoil. So when the rains come, they carry it away, washing Kenya's future downstream to the Indian Ocean. Professor Wangari Maathai was one of the first to realize what a critical resource her country was losing.
I know for certain that the soil is the sustainer of life. Without it, we cannot live. On this continent, we have seen too much suffering, starvation, due to degradation of the soil. And it has taken millions of years to build this topsoil. It is so important to protect it, because if we don't, we are on our way to the end.
For Wangari Maathai, the best way to protect the soil was to appeal to farmers. And in Africa, that usually means women. So she started a movement that women could not only join, but lead. Persuading women who work 12 hours a day in the fields to do even more isn't easy. But Dorika Imbunga and her mother, along with 50,000 others, rose to the challenge. They joined Mathai's Green Belt movement, a national effort to plant trees like these to provide firewood and protect soil. Or like these, to nourish crops and yield a bonus of fruit as well. Before the Green Belt movement started, it used to take Dorica 24 hours each week to gather her firewood. Now it takes half that time. And there's more to eat, too. Her harvests have improved, and there's fruit from the trees she planted. Dorica is organizer of the local Greenbelt chapter, and today they're welcoming their national leader, Wangari Maathai. Supported by international aid, the movement is widely regarded as one of the world's most successful attempts to combine community development with environmental protection. Completely deforested land like this is widespread in Kenya, and here Dorica's chapter is doing something about it. New seedlings often die without care, so members get a small fee for each tree that survives. But planting ideas is as important as planting trees. Wangari Maathai.
We deliberately decided to focus on an activity that anybody could participate in. Anybody can hurry, children, grown-ups. It's very easy to dig a hole and put a tree. So people don't feel like, well, the problem is enormous, but I can do nothing. This is something that everybody can do. During the tree planting campaign, you then bring out all the other issues that are very much related. The issues of food production, firewood crisis, soil erosion, desertification, all these are part and parcel of what we are discussing. But when we first discuss, we started with our immediate problems, the local problems, the problems we can see every day.
As Maathai understands, the local problems are the result of many competing pressures on Kenya's land and forests. Export crops like tea and coffee must be grown to pay off a crippling foreign debt. The famous game parks take up a lot of land, too, 10% of the country, but they also bring in vital income. Of course, tourists want souvenirs to take home from their safari. Wood carvings are especially popular. Many Kenyans make carvings for their living, but that also contributes to deforestation. The only way to sustain all this is to plant more trees than you cut. From the beginning, Maathai made environmental education a priority for the Green Belt movement. Over 1 million young people have been recruited to plant green belts around their schools and to care for the seedlings until they're growing well. Children often take the ideas home and get their parents involved. After a dozen years, the Green Belt movement is going strong. More than 7 million trees like these have been planted all over Kenya. The Green Belt movement has persuaded people living in poverty that planting trees will make a difference in their struggle to survive.
Sometimes I get very discouraged because the problems are just enormous, and although the people are very willing, sometimes they really think that you can solve all these problems at once, and you can't. But sometimes I also get very encouraged, especially when I see these trees growing in the nursery, or when they're so big that you see the farmers happy in their fields. It's very satisfying. So I go up and down all the time, and most of the time I think I'm on the better side.
Wangari Maathai has said that the healing of Africa is still only a dream perhaps like that of the people of the Soviet Union for clean air and water, or the residents of Kasmelia for a town free of toxic waste. In all these places, the impetus for change has come from the people themselves. Often it's sparked by dynamic individuals like Wangari Maathai. But particularly in the poorest countries, environmental improvement needs international help as well. Speaking at the United Nations, President Robert Mugabe of Zimbabwe explains the dilemma of the poor.
They know that cutting down trees and destruction of tropical forests will lead to soil erosion and future disasters. But their problem is survival today. To ask us to plan for our survival tomorrow when our survival today is in doubt is to demand too much of us. For it is only when we can survive today that we can talk of tomorrow.
Beating poverty requires economic growth. Economic growth, it was always thought, destroys the environment. But in 1987, after studying the global future, the World Commission on Environment and Development concluded differently. Headed by Gro Brundtland, Prime Minister of Norway, the Commission said poverty is the biggest environmental threat in developing countries. So improving human welfare through economic development is key to protecting the environment. Mrs. Brundtland.
There is no way to improve the environment without improving people's life conditions, generally. That link was new to many people who found themselves in a dilemma, having to choose between economic growth and caretaking of the environment. We need both, and it is possible to do both.
This new idea that economic development and environmental protection must proceed together applies in developing and industrialized countries alike. It's called sustainable development, and it means that one generation's activities must not jeopardize natural resources for future generations. The Mediterranean. Here, a pioneering alliance among developed and developing nations was based upon the same idea, protecting this shared sea for the future. For this Greek fisherman, there's a direct connection between the condition of the sea and his livelihood.
Από αυτό χρόνο είμαι θάλασσα μέσα. Είμαι 52 χρονών, από αυτό χρόνο είμαι θάλασσα μέσα. Είναι υγεία, θάλασσα είναι αυτό μας βιβλίο. Είναι υγεία, ας πούμε. Άμα θα πάρεις με θάλασσα, εμείς είμαστε τελειμένοι, ας πούμε.
In the mid-1960s, that was precisely the fear, that the Mediterranean was finished. Scientists were predicting it would be a dead sea within a decade. Fish were contaminated with sewage and toxic waste. Beaches had to be closed. But today, the fish markets are still full, and the Mediterranean, while still at risk, is holding its own. There's cautious hope these days that sewage and industrial pollution can one day be controlled. This optimism is largely the achievement of one man, Stefan Keshkesh, a Yugoslav diplomat who found the key to protecting the Mediterranean.
There is no way to solve a problem of the Mediterranean by individual countries. Pollution has no frontiers. In the sea there are no firm barriers which would prevent pollution originating from one country to get into the other country. Once it gets into the sea, it starts moving through the sea, and therefore only a concerted effort of all governments can solve the problem of the Mediterranean.
Starting in 1972, Keshkesh, working for the UN Environment Program, set out to persuade the Mediterranean countries that since pollution respects no boundaries, they had to act together. They all had an interest in a healthy sea, so they all had reason to cooperate. Keshkesh's idea was extraordinary, particularly for some countries who were more inclined to swap bullets than sewage treatment plants. But his work paid off. In 1975, 16 nations signed a pact of cooperation. Traditional enemies like Israelis and Arabs, Greeks and Turks, all working towards the same goal. Today, at its Athens headquarters, the Mediterranean Action Plan is in full swing. Over the years, member nations have continued meeting even during times of war. The original cohesive force has held. Coordinator Aldo Manos of Italy.
It is certainly not easy to get countries from the north and the south, developed, large and small, to agree on certain common standards and common approaches. But we have found that the Mediterranean, which they all call the cradle of their civilizations, has been a unifying factor, has allowed them to forget for a moment their differences in order to concentrate on what they are facing together.
This Greek pollution monitoring ship is one of 84 laboratories on land and sea set up under the plan. It represents Keşkeş's second key to saving the Mediterranean. If real progress was to be made, Keşkeş, himself a marine biologist, realized that each member nation had to first understand the condition of the sea. So he persuaded the governments that they needed their own scientists and laboratories, and the United Nations helped out with equipment and advice. It was an inspired strategy. Get the scientists to take the message to their own governments.
The whole point was to develop the scientific expertise in developing countries because governments believe their own people, so they wanted unbiased information about their own situation developed by their own people in whom they trust.
Oil at sea is a special problem in the Mediterranean, which carries 1/3 of the world's tanker traffic. Routine dumping of tanker waste causes most pollution, and one of the plan's first achievements was a treaty to ban it. Helping to turn the ban into reality has been Greek shipping executive Dennis Yatras.
Έλα, Νίκο. Τι κάνεις? Μισό λεπτό, έχω τον Giorgio στην άλλη γραμμή, μισό λεπτό. Giorgio, I have Nick in the other line. He's asking 5 cents.
Yatras has devised a way to recycle oil from tanker wastes. He turns a profit and protects the sea in the bargain.
I have been born in a country surrounded by the sea, so I love the sea. And I love by all means the sea. Making business in the sea, sailing, swimming, enjoying the sea. So I think that as a businessman, I have to do something to protect this, I can say, my love.
When a tanker comes into harbor, Yatras sends a small feeder ship to collect the oil wastes and carry them to a floating recycling center which he created on board this converted tanker. The facility collects 300,000 tons of waste a year. Yatras is introducing the system all over the Mediterranean, part of a general climate of environmental protection the plan has fostered.
The protection of the sea is protection of our life, and we owe to the next generation to deliver a clean sea as the previous generation delivered to us.
In addition to oil, Mediterranean Action Plan nations have banned dumping of cadmium, mercury, lead, arsenic, and many other toxic substances. But it's been recognized that rapid coastal development presents the biggest challenge, because where there are people, there is sewage. The plan's monitoring program has established that untreated sewage like this is the #1 problem facing the Mediterranean today. This huge new treatment plant for the city of Athens will open in 1991. All other countries have agreed to at least plan such facilities for their major cities. Of course, you can't treat sewage with plans, but the international agreement will help poor countries find the construction financing they'll need. Even the political commitment is an important step in the slow process of moving nations.
I am personally proud of what has been achieved in the Mediterranean Action Plan. 20 years ago, nobody believed that the countries are ready to sit down, and agree on certain measures. It demonstrated that countries with different political systems, with different economic development level, with different religion, and with different approach to history and culture and everything, can work together whenever there is a demonstrated need for working together.
The plan showed that environmental pressures can bring change even to the intractable world of international politics. Stefan Keşkeş now heads a UN program overseeing 9 other regional sea agreements around the world. From Antarctica came warning that environmental problems were not only regional, they were global. In 1985, scientists reported a huge hole in Antarctica's protective ozone layer. the ozone was missing over an area as large as the United States. The ozone layer shields all life on Earth from the sun's harmful ultraviolet radiation. Losing ozone would mean increases in skin cancer and damage to crops. The most likely cause of the ozone hole was a class of chemicals called chlorofluorocarbons, or CFCs, used as coolants in refrigerators, as industrial solvents, and as propellants in some aerosols. With CFCs building up in the atmosphere, there was no time to waste.
Urgent action is necessary to prevent destruction of the atmosphere's protective ozone shield.
Negotiations were held around the world for a global treaty to control CFCs. Within 2 years, the Montreal Protocol to protect the ozone layer was signed. Like the Mediterranean Action Plan, nations saw they had a common interest to protect. But as NASA scientist Robert Watson explains, the protocol was an unprecedented preventive action.
The Montreal Protocol was clearly the first time that most of the nations of the world had agreed to try and solve an environmental problem before it had really manifested itself. Clearly there had been some levels of ozone depletion in the Antarctic, but we had not established cause and effect. So the politicians of the world actually decided to have some limited phase out of the fluorocarbons even before we had established a true cause and effect relationship.
Watson helped set the protocol's bold targets for CFC reduction, even before alternative chemicals had been developed. This was a clear sign to industry that CFCs were going to go and that it would be worth the investment to develop substitutes. Such attention to the interests of all concerned is essential if ambitious global agreements are to work. London. 2 years after the Montreal Protocol, the ozone layer is still at risk. Scientists warn that the protocol's targets may not be strict enough, and many nations have yet even to ratify it. A global conference to encourage participation is convened by Prime Minister Thatcher and Mustafa Tolba, head of the UN Environment Program.
Unless all nations commit themselves to the elimination of ozone-depleting chemicals, the agreement is compromised, and the environment does not tolerate compromise.
It is not a case of some countries asking other countries to act. It's a case of every country taking action if we are to protect all peoples.
But a predictable clash develops. China argues that industrial countries who caused the problem in the first place and who use far more CFCs should cut back more than developing countries.
In the protocol itself, there are also inequitable elements because we feel that the protocol has not really embodied the principle of the more emissions that you make, the more reductions that you should make as well.
With official squabbling going on at the diplomatic conference, across town the environmentalists are holding their own meeting.
This is the amended protocol.
It was Friends of the Earth UK, which forced a reluctant Britain to sign the Montreal Protocol by organizing a consumer boycott.
The voluntary approach has not worked in this country. It is the environment movement that has worked in this country, and the ability of this country to meet the deadlines set by the existing Montreal Protocol schedules has been brought about purely because of the campaign by Friends of the Earth and consumers in this country.
Even on global issues, environmental groups exerting pressure behind the scenes are a force governments cannot ignore. It took another year, but eventually 100 countries signed up, including China and the developing countries, after economic aid was promised. In the new global politics of the environment, everybody has an interest. Industry, environmentalists, rich countries, poor countries. And for politicians, the environment is a powerful new political imperative. Margaret Thatcher's conversion is extraordinary. She used to call environmental groups the enemy within.
And it's only with the active cooperation of millions upon millions of people who are ready to change their customs and habits in what they buy and what they do. It's only then that we shall overcome
one of the greatest challenges which life on Earth has yet faced.
Madam Prime Minister, the life support systems of our planet are collapsing. You and I may not be alive to experience the dreadful results, but your grandchild will. We owe it to the newly born generation to do all in our power to hand over a living Earth. Thank you.
The treaty process pioneered for ozone will soon be tested to the limit as the world addresses a vastly more complex problem: global warming. Within 60 years, the greenhouse effect is predicted to warm the Earth up to 8 degrees. This may bring more droughts and more heat spells, disrupting agriculture worldwide. It may also bring a sea level rise of up to 2 feet, threatening millions who live near the coast with catastrophic floods. Greenhouse warming is caused by carbon dioxide gas from the burning of coal and oil, by deforestation, which releases carbon dioxide stored in trees, and by the ozone-damaging CFCs. They're also greenhouse gases. Controlling the billions of sources of all these gases will require global cooperation on a grand scale. In the Wasatch Mountains of Utah in 1989, the delicate process of building consensus on global warming was beginning. Scientists, politicians, environmentalists gathered at the Sundance Institute for unofficial discussions. A contingent of Soviets inspired the theme, Greenhouse Glasnost.
How many meetings can you go to?
Serving as host was actor and environmentalist Robert Redford.
I'd like to propose a toast to our Soviet guests and say that our nations have competed for so long and so destructively, and the waste of resources has been both a human and environmental tragedy. And I myself am very honored to be a part of an effort to rechannel our imaginations and our talents to a more positive end. So I drink to peace, and I drink to healing our planet.
I would like to refer to my recent personal experience.
Soviet scientist Roy Scheider set the agenda for cooperation.
In 10 years from now, the issue of nuclear survival is going to be completely obsolete. This is ecology, environment, which are going to shape our future. That's why...
As with ozone, much discussion was devoted to developing countries with their growing energy needs. Could they avoid the mistakes of the West and leapfrog to energy-efficient technologies? Noel Brown of the United Nations Environment Program.
What the developing countries are saying is that we are prepared to cooperate with you, but we have got to redefine the terms. You will not dictate the terms to us if our development has to be sacrificed. Most of the technologies that you have that are efficient and environmentally benign could be transferred to us at costs that are reasonable and that could be subsidized.
In a world where the environment links all our destinies, cooperation will be needed between rich and poor, between East and West.
President Reagan once said, if only there would be Martians, then United States and Soviet Union could join together to defend the planet. I think now we have even more dangerous enemy.
International cooperation will be essential in slowing down greenhouse warming, argued climate scientist Steve Schneider. But individuals can also play an important role.
First thing we need to do is make people recognize that when they walk out of their house and they shut out the light switch, that's important. Because leaving it on, although it's only a little bit of energy, may not seem like much, but when you multiply that times literally billion people on the planet doing that thousands of times, that saves real energy and it gives us the right consciousness. Then we need to have our automobiles and our appliances energy efficient. That starts to make a really big difference. And ultimately we have to send messages to our politicians. We have to tell them, we not only expect you to help our economy develop, but we expect you to find creative solutions so that the economy can develop in an environmentally sustainable way. And if you don't, we're going to put somebody else in charge.
In Washington, President Bush has been slow to act, but he says he's getting the environmental message.
I think we've taken dramatic strides in environmental awareness, and I readily admit that others have been way out in front of me. But I can tell you this, and I hope I can convince those that are still skeptics that I do care and that it is essential that we all care.
In Moscow, President Mikhail Gorbachev says global cooperation on the environment will be necessary.
Экологический кризис, который мы переживаем, убедительное, хотя и трагичное доказательство того, что мир действительно взаимосвязан, взаимозависим. Нужна соответствующая международная политика и в сфере экологии. Только совместно мы сможем предотвратить трагедию. Но час решения наступил. Час исторического выбора.
It is the hour of decision for the human future. Our environment is steadily deteriorating. Disruption of the atmosphere gathers momentum. Toxic materials accumulate, and the Earth's wild plants and animals disappear. As the century closes, 4 challenges stand paramount. First, reduce population growth by improving human welfare and promoting family planning. Our current numbers of 5 billion are set to double in 60 years, and every environmental problem will get tougher as a result. Population is not just a third world issue. A child born in America will use 30 times more of the Earth's resources than one born in India. Second, slow greenhouse warming by reducing carbon dioxide emissions. A global treaty will be needed, but meanwhile, countries can require fuel-efficient cars, tax carbon dioxide emitters, and develop alternative energy, like wind and solar power. Individuals can save energy by insulating their homes, using more efficient lighting, and leaving the car home once in a while. And everybody can plant trees. Third, reduce and recycle waste. Individuals can help by recycling. In theory, 80% of materials that get dumped could be reused. Corporations can reduce toxic waste at the source by rethinking their manufacturing processes. And governments can encourage markets for recycled materials and stiffen penalties for toxic polluters. Fourth, conserve forests and wild species. The world loses an acre of forest every second. Uncounted plants and animals every year. Individuals can help by supporting organizations working to preserve wild habitats. And governments can provide aid and debt relief to help developing countries in protecting tropical forests. Meeting these challenges will be the key to sustaining our existence on the planet. Lester Brown.
We are at a crossroads. We're going to have to try to get the world back onto a sustainable development path. To do that, we have to make peace with each other so we can make peace with nature. The two are not unrelated.
Although we are only a single species within nature, we have a unique ability to destroy. Of course, regardless of whether we treat it wisely, the Earth will go on. It is we who need the Earth. We depend on its bounty to sustain us and our children to come. It is our own future at stake. We're in a race to save ourselves. It's all up to us.
I don't really know why I care so much. I just have something inside me that tells me that there is a problem and I have got to do something about it. So I'm doing something about it. I think that that is what I would call the God in me. And all of us have a God in us. And that God is the spirit that unites all life, everything that is on this planet. And it must be this voice that is telling me to do something. And I'm sure it's the same voice that is speaking to everybody on this planet, at least everybody who seems to be concerned about the fate of the world, the fate of this planet.
This has been the final episode in our series. Thank you for joining us.
Major funding for Race to Save the Planet is provided by the Annenberg CPB Project and public television viewers. Corporate funding is provided by Ocean Spray. Our continuing aim is to preserve and protect what we cannot create. Additional funding is provided by Jesse Smith Noyes Foundation, Corporation for Public Broadcasting, the John D. and Catherine T. MacArthur Foundation, and Carnegie Corporation of New York, and by the following. For more information on the college telecourse, video cassettes, off-air videotaping, and books based on the series, call 1-800-LEARNER.
This is PBS.
The Global Ecology Handbook, published by Beacon Press, is available for $16.95 plus shipping. A transcript of this program is available for $5. Please call 1-800-TALK-SHOW or send a check to Race to Save the Planet, Journal Graphics, 267 Broadway, New York, New York, 10007.